Hello and welcome to this special session of the News Exchange. I'm Liz Corbin. I'm the head of news here at the EBU in Geneva. Some of you may have been to News Exchange sessions for many, many years, but some of you may be joining us for the first time. Today, I am delighted to be introducing this session with the BBC's new Director General, Tim Davie. I'm also honoured that Hala Gorani from CNN has agreed to host this session.
Thank you very much, Liz and Tim Davie. It's a pleasure to meet you virtually. Tim Davie, just to remind all of those who've joined us over Zoom and who might be watching this on playback, you've been with the BBC for 15 years. You had several roles. You were an acting Director General for about a year's time. Finally, you took over as Director General in September, and you really hit the ground running. You made some announcements, issued guidelines and a series of rules specifically regarding the BBC, the effort to maintain impartiality, or the perception of impartiality at the BBC. You've also been very busy in the last few weeks following a documentary that claimed, that showed that the BBC had several decades ago forged bank statements in the lead up to an interview with Princess Diana. We'll get to all those editorial questions in a moment, but Tim, first, I want to ask you, in the last few weeks, since you've taken over the top job at the BBC, what's it been like in the middle of a pandemic with all of these questions and challenges that you've had to face?
Firstly, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here virtually. I'm sorry we couldn't be together, and I really appreciate the time. I think, if people ask me how it's been, I normally say demanding but rewarding. And what I mean by that is, look, this job isn't, you don't take a job like this, and I know there's many people running big organizations out there. You don't take these jobs for a quiet life. But I think it's actually, and I said it in my opening remarks, I really believe it's important. I believe institutions like the BBC are important. They're important to who we are. And I care about this place desperately. I've worked in commercial businesses. I've worked in different sectors. And I'm sure many people watching this will recognize that once you get into something you care about and you think is important, you can't get it out your system. So, I have days when you do wonder why you took the job, but they're fleeting in some ways, because actually it's been very rewarding. And I think there's quite a lot at stake here for all of us who care about, we'll talk about this, impartial news, public service broadcasting. There's a lot at stake. We've got to decide what we want and go after it.
So let's talk a little bit about these impartiality, these new social media guidelines, because some employees at the BBC perhaps took it as not necessarily something that, especially minority employees or LGBTQ employees, saying that their very existence means that they might tweet something that is deemed controversial by the mainstream. How do you respond to that criticism that some of these guidelines that you've issued might go against some of the concerns of some of the minority employees at the BBC?
Yeah, I think let me start at the top, if I may, and I'll get directly to your question, which is, I think the first thing is, I think there's massive, almost universal support for a doubling down on impartiality. I mean, it's actually interesting. The BBC's trust numbers, I'm sure, the EBU is a great forum to talk about this, which is actually, we know, and I will get to your question, but I think the high principle of the value of impartial news, trusted news, really going after impartiality. And boy, those of us who have chosen to go for that course, it's not an easy task. In some ways, you're always going to be striving for perfection, knowing that you'll never get it spot on. And I actually haven't had, I sense, any real pressure or kickback on that principle. Then you get into the tough world of actually deploying that through social media, through guidance, all of the things we've been doing. I think, some of it we didn't get yet. We've been learning as we go. I mean, it's very clear that, I've said on the record, and spoken to many members of my staff from the LGBTQ plus community, through, some of the BA and ME employees. And it's really important to say that topics like racism, sexuality, your identity is not a matter of impartiality. When it comes to the BBC, it's utterly clear. We stand firmly for a democratic society where your identity is sacrosanct. These are not matters for debate. But there was people demand it. This is part of what we're in now, which is then you then test that and say, okay, what do I mean by this? And we have had some moments where we've had to clarify. Look, if you're going on, frankly, a march that is about an event which is clearly about the principle of anti-racism, that's great. But if you're in the news operation, we would advise people to shy away from party political statements or matters of, current policy conflicts. And I would say just the final thing is this is only about news, current affairs and senior management. So for the vast majority of the BBC, there's more freedom.
So, for instance, Tim, if I asked you, Gary Lineker tweeting, Trump might be the first president to leave the White House to spend less time with his family, that's okay.
Yeah, I think it's not as if people, you know as well as I do, that managing creative talent is always going to be a fun and engaging business. But what we've said is it's absolutely clear that we don't expect party political kind of tweets from the news, current affairs, and the rest of, and the senior management. There are some personalities, of which Gary is one, and he's said it, which is, I think, getting into major issues of public policy conflict is not the right thing to do. And, I think some people have said, well, are you going to fire a load of people? Look, we're going to actively manage it. We're going to be talking to people, guiding them, but it's not that complex. I know the issues are complex, but what we're trying to do is not that complex. It is to make sure that when you hear a BBC report, you trust the person to give you a truly impartial view. That's what we're trying to do.
So, for instance, at CNN, my network, anchors, journalists use the verb to actually say that the President of the United States is lying. They're using that word. Would you be okay with a BBC journalist saying that the President of the United States lied about the election results? Is this something that would be acceptable?
It totally depends on the evidence base. In the abstract, I can't answer that question. It depends. It depends on what situation have arisen to the journalists to make that conclusion, and whether they've got a completely look. Our energy is around finding truth, getting to testimony, getting to evidence, and then reporting the facts. And that's what we're. It's. I think there are kind of probably sharper ways of describing a situation, but I'm not going to kind of judge one sentence in the abstract. I think the news editors listening to this, and I ran BBC Radio for a while. It is more nuanced than that. It's, are you getting a fair and impartial picture? I mean, it's interesting. I think truth. I think it's critical. If you go across the sweep of our news presenters, they leave their politics at the door when they come to work, and they get on with it and they find the story. What I was worried about, for what it's worth, is a slight, and this is really interesting in the context of what's happening politically around the world, was there a slight lack of confidence about the impartiality brief? Is it seen as a little dull? Are we getting more into this polarized world where the only way of getting flavoursome reporting is around more partial reporting? And I wanted, and I think we at the BBC feel very strongly, that you can get absolutely flavoursome, exciting, very passionate reporting, which is all about that passion for the truth. I think we need to make that case. I really think we need to make that case. It's under threat.
Right, and this is something that we've heard. I mean, Andrew Marr, one of your star presenters, actually has echoed that in an interview just a few days ago, essentially saying that the BBC is under threat, that you have said that the BBC currently faces a significant risk and has no inalienable right to exist. Do you really have a concern as far as the BBC's future?
I'm a big fan of healthy paranoia.
Yeah.
Unhealthy paranoia, by the way, is when you're worried about your internal politics and all that nonsense. The healthy paranoia for the BBC and for all public service broadcasters is one of relevance. We've been in a situation where many of us have benefited, quite right, and it's been a wonderful situation where we've had fixed distribution. But look, we know in our families now we're in an IP-enabled world where there is infinite choice. In that, the threats to the BBC, the challenges to the BBC, I think we often see them as the latest crisis or a current political flavour. That's not, in my mind, to be clear, where the real challenges for public service broadcasting are. They're about relevance. And the BBC's model is an amazing thing. I would support it wholeheartedly, but it does require that every household feels they're getting really good value from £157.50, which they're being charged through the licence fee. And that is the job here. That's what I mean by a threat. It's if you take that for granted, and distribution is not going to give it to you naturally. You're going to have to earn it with the quality of your content and be very, very distinctive.
Well, one of the things Andrew Marr was quoted as saying is there's a drive on to destroy the BBC. They've clearly got supporters in the government. Do you agree with that? Who are these supporters, do you think, that are perhaps looking to destroy the corporation?
Well, I think you'll have to ask Andrew to identify who he's got in his head. I think, look, there's always been...
But do you agree there's a drive to destroy the BBC?
My sense is there has always been people, and they're in the paper every day, who ideologically would say, do we need an intervention like the BBC, a universal intervention that is public service broadcasting? There's always been people who have questioned that. My case is straightforward, which is actually that if you look at the strength of the UK creative industries, I called it in a speech I gave the enlightened blend between public and private interventions. Actually, if you look at the creative industries in the UK, they're growing 3 times the speed of the rest of the economy. We're creating jobs. This is a wonderful and precious ecosystem between public service and private enterprise. And, both have actually thrived. My view is that is an incredible thing to protect. Having said all of that, statements of grand principle are all fine and dandy, but the problem is the support for the BBC, the real support for the BBC is all about, and I come back to it, does a household feel they have £157.50 of value? If that is in place, and the vast majority of households do at the moment, but if they feel they're getting that value, then I think we're in a strong position. You'll always be able to go to Parliament and find various views on an intervention like the BBC, as you will do on all matters where there's public policy involved.
Right. In the Times this weekend, there's a little snippet about the departure of the top advisor of the Prime Minister, Dominic Cummings. Quote, he was instrumental in the government's attacks on the BBC with plans to cut its size and influence, potentially scrapping the license fee altogether. How does his departure change things for you, if at all?
It doesn't change our focus at all. Our focus is on audiences and getting value from audiences. We want to get our value to audiences. We're not clearly we're into a process with the government about our funding from 22 to 27. But actually, I don't think this is all about one advisor or one particular politician. This is about us focusing on audiences. Simple as that.
Let's talk about the future of linear television. It's on its way out. Some could argue that we've been predicting the demise of linear television now for years and years. It's still there. But there are studies out there, one in particular that caught my eye. On average, people in the UK, as of June, streamed content for 43 minutes per day longer than linear television. What are your plans at the BBC for potentially streaming some of the content? What model do you favor going forward to keep the BBC as front and center in people's homes as possible?
Well, we're already well developed. I mean, thank goodness that the BBC developed the iPlayer in terms of our video content. Remember, our big online products are iPlayer on video, Sounds on audio, and the news online presence and streaming services. So there's absolutely no doubt that it's fascinating, because I think traditional organizations are so shaped structurally in their thinking around linear, the fixed schedule. And really for a decade, certainly since I joined the BBC, we've always been thinking, at what point are we going to flip over to a fully online driven model? Are we coming across the bridge here? I think we're at a defining point at the moment, which is if you look at some of our television production now, we're absolutely commissioning for streaming as well as linear, airing, if you like. And we are looking, I think, properly now in the round at the numbers we deliver, for instance, drama numbers, entertainment, all of that. We're looking at consolidated numbers across streaming, across linear. And whereas I think a few years ago, people were talking about it and saying, yeah, we look at iPlayer, we look at online. Honestly, we look at it at the success of a title now. And certainly our value to audiences is that blend of streamed media value as well as linear. And I think we'll be in that blended situation. Linear's going nowhere for a long, long time, by the way. And I think we'll be in this hybrid situation. What you don't want to do, finally, I think what's really stressful as you do the choose your word, pivot, whatever, is what you don't want to do is creating vast swathes of content for online, vast swathes of content for linear in completely separate silos. Right, you need to begin to look at content in the round. And I've said, one of the things I think we've done a little bit too much of is just make more and more to fill all the podcast market, all of this. We do need to make some choices and say, where is the high impact content? And the BBC will probably make a little less. I mean, I've said this, make a little less, but have greater impact. Because the truth is the BBC doesn't need to be every hour of people's media consumption. It needs to be a few hours, but very special. That's where the value comes.
When you say linear isn't going anywhere for a very long time, what makes you say that? I mean, I look at the younger generation. I have nieces, 20 and 24 years old. They don't own a television.
Right.
They only stream. They only watch on playback, or if they watch a live event, it might be online, maybe a sports event, but not on a television screen.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. It's a really the screen's one thing, and then linear's another. Yeah, so yeah. The television, I think, is let's call it a screen, because we're gone from I don't quite know where it stops and starts now, but I just see a screen. I'm with you. And by the way, it's a good pickup. You're right to pick me up, because I should have been clearer, I think, because look, linear consumption in number of hours is going to go down. That's just a fact. Yeah, and we're in denial if we expect linear to hold up, because we've only got to look at our own habits. When I say it's not going anywhere, I think the idea that it just disappears. I mean, again, I think everyone knows this. It's not rocket science. Is the big channels, the big linear channels, will still hold up. I mean, also in radio, for instance, I think the serendipity and the wonders of a linear network will hold up for practically forever. But that will be alongside streams on demand. And you're right, it's going to be, linear's going to be smaller, so it needs to be more focused. And I don't think there'll be so many channels out there, linear channels. It's going to be a little bit brutal as the market tidies itself up and kind of adapts to the new realities. But I do think, in the UK at the moment, we've got two big entertainment shows, Strictly Come Dancing and I'm a Celebrity, on the two big networks. They're doing kind of huge audiences, and they ain't the same if it's on demand. And that's gonna stay on those big channels for pretty much forever, I think.
All right, I'm just kind of scrolling through some of the questions that have come through, Tim. Here we go. A lot of questions, by the way, I have to say, on the social media guidelines. I'd say every other one is about that. But let me ask you about the Diana documentary, because that's really been in the headlines. You've committed to the BBC to an independent investigation looking into the circumstances surrounding the forging of bank statements that the brother of the late Princess Diana claims played a role in her agreeing to this interview. Now, this was before, of course, you joined the BBC. How concerned are you that whatever comes out of this investigation will hurt the BBC or will tarnish its image?
Well, I think we're taking it very seriously. And anything that is a risk to the BBC's trust is a serious issue for us. It's as simple as that. what's paramount, and it's been pretty clear in my pitch, that we're impartial, we're trusted, and if there are questions around that, we take them very seriously. As you say, it's events of 25 years ago, but it's really important we get frankly, to the truth and just get this properly looked at. So I've committed and will be delivering on my commitment to a fully independent investigation and get that going. So that's what we'll be doing.
And one more on this subject. The BBC says it found a handwritten note by Princess Diana that is claimed could clear the BBC of wrongdoing in relation to that interview. Where can you tell us where that note was?
I can't at the moment. The letter. All I can say is, all I can say is what we said, which is we have recovered the letter after announcing that we were doing an investigation, and we'll submit that into the investigation. I mean, any of the evidence just needs to go to the independent investigation. As I say, we just get to the truth. I want, you can imagine in terms of all of the position of the BBC's current team is, we want the truth. That'll be a fully independent investigation and totally empowered to look at anything, including that letter or any documentation that is available. So I just think I need to let that investigation get on with it, and that's what we'll be doing.
Well, I won't ask you about the content of the note. Just you've seen it yourself?
Well, I've read what it purports to say. So I will, in terms of reporting, and so we'll let the investigation get on with it. And I'll just say that at this point.
All right. Let me move on to the pay gap debate at the BBC, because this is something that is, of course, a big topic of discussion in newsrooms all around the world, including my own network as well. You have committed to hiring a more diverse and more equal in terms of pay workforce. Your ambition is to make the BBC a 50-20-12 organization, 50% women, 50% men, and at least 20% Black, Asian, minority ethnic, and 12% disabled. What is your strategy to get to reach those numbers and that goal?
The strategy is actually make individual leaders fully accountable for targets they own. It's as simple as that. I think in this area, look, I've been very blunt. We're not short of good intent. We're not short of good speeches. There's lots of them. Seriously, in terms of people around the saying we've got to, as public service. And by the way, this isn't just the right thing to do. If we're a public service broadcaster and my team and myself are utterly committed to be relevant to every household, one of the biggest metrics for us is the BBC for me? And those people running broadcasters, public service broadcasts, I think that's a really good metric. Is the BBC for me? You cannot hope to get an organisation that is for you unless the way in which it attracts people, the way in which decisions are made is fully inclusive and representative of a modern UK. Now, I would say, by the way, we beat ourselves up a bit. We've done a really good job in on-screen representation in some areas. 45% in terms of leadership are women. We've made really good progress. We got 6.2% is our gender pay gap, which versus others in the market is very good. But there is a big but, which is we haven't moved fast enough. And there's still been issues, and we've had to resolve issues around equal pay, and that is not good enough. So the tactic, by the way, is just to get into this if you're interested, because I do think we're all struggling with this, is clear, which is traditionally sometimes people like myself have said, can we do something in 3 years and we just drop a target down? I am doing something different with my senior team. I'm saying to the newsroom, I'm saying to the content teams, I'm saying to radio, okay, we all agree we want to create a more representative BBC, 50% in terms of female-male balance, 20% BAME, and 12% disabled staff. And that's the minimum we should be in terms of when you look where the UK is going, and definitely we should be there. And if you were running the newsroom, I'd say it needs to be much more granular. okay, you've got this many people at this level. What does it do what do we really need to do in shaping that? How long will it take to get that? And then there's a whole load of initiatives, the kind of people you recruit, the kind of shortlists you put in. But it's granular, it's detailed work, not grand statements. So I'm kind of even slightly nervous about talking about these grand themes. You just got to do the work. And we've got to roll up our sleeves at the BBC and make progress, not just talk.
But as you mentioned, you still have a pay gap. The top paid talent is a man. I mean, I know that there have been some adjustments and efforts made, and that has reduced the gap. But there is still work that needs to be done. And these are questions we're getting. And by the way, it's just, as you mentioned, not just the BBC. This is across the board in our industry and in many.
And it's really important. There are two. I mean, I think most people on this will. Session will probably be across this, but there is two lenses on this. There's the gender pay gap, which is a function of how women are spread through the organisation, and we need more women in senior positions. We're at 45%. But then you've also got, if you look at the pay differences at every band, they're 3% or less. And we've been very, I mean, look, we're not perfect, but we've been working very, very hard to make sure that we have equal pay in the back. I mean, it's a legal right for everyone. It's non-negotiable. And I think we're in with a handful of cases now. But we have had some issues, and we need to build trust. And look, I think there's many, if I'm honest, the BBC tends to be at the sharp edge of some of these changes and these cultural changes. That brings its own pressures if you're leading the BBC, but it's the right thing to do. And we've got work to do here.
How do you judge? I mean, how do you make sure women and men are paid the same for the same job when it's on-air talent that's concerned? Because those are subjective.
Well, they're not wholly. I think the point is they're not fully subjective. Okay.
Not fully, but partly.
Well, I think experience is a factor in there, but the key thing is you have across the BBC, and this gets quite detailed, but we now have the frameworks, job families, and thanks to the efforts of some of the people who frankly raised some of these issues, we've got through our processes. We now have a much more solid framework to make those decisions. Now, we'll be judged by our actions. We need to make sure we're delivering on equal pay. It's non-negotiable, and we've got to keep building trust with people that we deliver on that. I do think our systems are now, and we're welcome to share with other people and actually, just get best practice. I have only one agenda leading the organisation, that we are absolutely get to that 50-20-12, and equal pay is delivered flawlessly through the organisation. I think we're in a pretty good spot, and I say that very sensitively because I know that people who've been through there's been a lot of difficult times for people going through the processes of getting to that. And we just need to deal with issues as they come. But I think we've made progress. We have a lot of work still to do. And I'm talking to women's groups in the BBC, and we're engaging in that conversation. I don't think everyone's happy yet. We need to do some work because I do think we need to keep building trust.
I'm going to get to some questions from broadcasters across Europe. This is, by the way, bear with me. This is my first ever Zoom in conversation, so it's a learning curve for me. Alison Vernon Smith. Tim's answer about doing less for more impact presupposes that you always know what's going to have impact, and you don't. What's your answer to that question?
My answer is it's a very good point, and it's difficult. It's difficult, and I think part of it is not closing. Doing less does not necessarily do less experimentation, but it does mean once you've experimented, if I can be really blunt, killing stuff fast if it's not working. So I absolutely agree with the spirit of the question, which is you've got to keep. And by the way.
How fast, Tim? Because sometimes, some shows take 2-3 years. One in particular, I was very interested in, I don't know if I'm sure you're familiar with Schitt's Creek, right?
Yeah.
After 2 seasons, they were just kind of airing on this obscure U.S. channel. Netflix picked them up, and they became the biggest runaway hit. For 2 years, nobody practically in the U.S. was aware they even existed. So how long do you give a show or a project before you decide it's not getting the pickup?
Honestly, that's why we pay really great editors. And by the way, you're reading my mind, because I was thinking comedy. Because comedy can often take 2-3 years. We've got programs like This Country that are phenomenal. They've grown over time, and they're slow burn. I'd say a couple of things. One is, this isn't a one size fits all. But if you did a podcast, and after a few months, and it's a spin-off from one of your news programs, and you're just not getting traction, you sometimes reasonably quickly know whether you need to do that or whether you'd rather spend your time elsewhere. There's other areas, I'll give you examples, where we are making dramas for one of our linear radio stations and another drama for our sound service, the audio service. Should we be making sure, and we made real progress in this area, just making sure that duplication is reduced so that you can pull budgets. We make a lot of local output in the nation, so Scotland, Wales, that sometimes go on the Welsh service, for instance, BBC Wales, as we call an opt-out, but hasn't gone to the network. We should be doing more of that. The quality levels are such that we can do that. So look, there's no scenario in which the BBC is not doing thousands of hours and very broad. It was just a question. What I find sometimes is in public service operations, the BBC gets, a decent sum of money at the top, and then it puts it down into all its projects. Sometimes, if you look at what's happening in the global market, you need to make sure you've got some flexibility of funding. And it's actually right to that question about making sure you've got enough creative energy. I feel sometimes budgets can get locked off and you don't get enough creative oxygen, financial oxygen, I should say, to get the creativity moving. So that's all I'm talking about. And if you go to our website, if you go to other areas, I take your point. You have to wait and allow creative work to thrive. But you could say we there are areas where we could do slightly less and get more impact in other areas.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you a Brexit question. Ole Zeriksson from Swedish Radio asks, after the BBC has been a very active member of the EBU and has actively sought cooperation with European public service partners, will this commitment be as clear under your lead as under Tony Hall's last year, after Brexit, that is?
Totally. Frankly, just 100%. We absolutely see. I mean, I spent my last job in the BBC, was actually running BBC studios around the world. And the one thing I can see is scale counts. It's not everything, because we as public service broadcasters can do things that are distinctive, different, bespoke. We can get to places that, some of the global players may not get to, but not sensibly using our scale as together in the EBU would be it would just be silly. So no, we are very, very much there to support the efforts of the EBU as an active member and do the right things. And I saw the way we're sharing news content. I mean, I've been taken through some of this. I'm a passionate supporter of it. So there's no change in support and energy as we pass the baton between Tony and myself.
There was a report, or actually, in fact, I should say, Jeremy Clarkson himself said that you asked him to come back to the BBC, to come home. Is that true?
I would honestly, I would never ever comment on a private conversation with one of my talent. I'll let Jeremy. Jeremy can opine on that rather than me.
But would you want him back?
No, I'm not going to go into a discussion about my chats with my Jeremy and I go back a long way through Top Gear, so I'm not going to go through that.
All right. That's something he said. Let me ask you about, I'm getting a lot of questions from people watching us about linear television. They're very interested in how you, and I know we've gone through this, but let me just get to this question here that, of course, I lost track of. Just give me 1 second. Someone just said, you're getting a lot of rustling noise on my mic. I apologize. Am I getting a lot of rustling? No, I'm not. Okay.
I'm getting a lot of rustling, by the way, just so you know. So
oh, good.
I'm speaking for the crowd. I think we got some rustling at your end.
Okay, if TV linearity is on the downhill, this is a question from Josef Kutahar, where will traditional anchors fall? So Jeremy Paxman, Emily Maitlis, their interviews are, get a lot of traction because they're on linear TV. This is a question coming, as I mentioned, from Josef Kutahar. What's your answer to that?
Firstly, I think great talent will always find a place in an audience. That's the first thing. I mean, I think they are not. I mean, it's dangerous territory going back to Jeremy after refusing to engage on that one. But he's built a successful career with Amazon.
No, this is Paxman. He mentioned Jeremy Paxman.
No, sorry, that Jeremy. I've got too many Jeremys in my life. But sorry. Yeah, I think that those news anchors. Well, firstly, just to repeat, I don't think the big linear channels are going anywhere. And I think those moments, particularly, by the way, those live moments, I mean, this is the obvious one, are still going to be extremely, important. I mean, you see even now the audiences we're getting for live briefings. I mean, we haven't even mentioned, by the way, COVID and everything that's going on in terms of the role of public service broadcasting in that. But that we see that value, and I think that honestly, human beings are not. There some things don't change, and that live moment when you're in the moment is still incredibly valuable. Now, the truth is that doesn't need to sit necessarily on a linear channel. I mean, we're seeing more and more evidence that people coming onto iPlayer can pick up. Do we do more on iPlayer with live, and then there's the question of, and this is a bit me. As the marketing man thinking is, you've also got to think about how you brand those big anchor interviews. How do you strip them into iPlayer? How do you do? So we've just got to get better at marketing some of these things across our services. So if we've got a landmark interview on the BBC, one of the big questions for us is, how do we make sure it's sitting properly on the news site, linked into iPlayer, linked into linear? And therefore, you put all that together, you've got a pretty compelling proposition for someone of a Maitlis or a Paxman's stature to get that big interview across. So look, I'm pretty bullish about great talent and great content finding an audience. It's just going to be in a different. We're just going to be looking at it in a different way.
Can you clarify that a bit? What do you mean? It's about how you market the content on various platforms like
well, there's two elements.
Where can you improve there?
Well, two elements, I think. One is prominence, and that's really interesting because you've got to work out, I think it's a really interesting challenge for public service broadcasters around personalization, if I may, for a minute, which is, I think versus some of the other services globally, we're going to have a more nuanced situation that's just driving something that's wholly personalized simply to drive ad sales or eyeballs to justify a subscription. I think we've also got a role to play which says what is important. So when I go to BBC News, I actually don't want something that's so personalised that you're just getting news of my football team and things that I theoretically go to most of all. What I want is actually the BBC, and this is our curatorial power, to say, I like to know what the BBC newsroom is, saying, okay, these are the top 5 stories. I think we have some power in that, in terms of the so-called carousel at the top of iPlayer, all those things. How do we get personalization, but also as public service broadcasters, we are able to say, look, this is important. So that's one element of the marketing, which is what prominence do you give? And by the way, there are broader questions around public service broadcasters getting prominence on-demand platforms like televisions, whatever. There's a whole subject which I feel strongly about, but we may not want to go there. The other area of marketing, by the way, is just how you brand, how you name things, how you market them, the graphic, some of those superficials, which in some ways, if you're a content person, you might say, well, it's all a bit exhausting because it's marketing. But how a show, you look at what happened to documentary, the grammar of it, the punch of it, what the US players have kind of transformed in a way how we market documentaries. And some of the things the BBC's been doing, we've just got a Trump documentary, The Trump Show. We've got Once Upon a Time in Iraq. With the way we're marketing these, the way we're pushing them out, I think is slightly different and slightly more high impact in its marketing than it would have been a few years ago.
But also documentaries are really with Netflix and these kind of true, I mean, there are historical documentaries, but true crime documentaries and documentary series are really enjoying a resurgence.
But if you take in our world, you take things like Blue Planet or the Planet series, the really big. If it's interesting, we've chosen to call them Blue Planet, Frozen Planet, and that brings in. Look, the truth is, and I say with slightly heavy heart, there's so much choice out there that navigation is a real problem for all of us. I'm sure everyone listening to this spends that really strange moment in their they sit down and you've got all the things you could look through and you can find yourself searching for 20 minutes. The data is pretty clear, which is people go to what they trust and what they know. So if you can, and that to me is about the same for news anchors, it's the same for David Attenborough presenting the Planet series. You absolutely need to help people and say, this is a landmark piece of content and is well branded and clear. The game has got tougher. If you just put stuff out without doing that, you're going to limit the impact.
What's interesting is I watch documentaries when I get recommendations from people I trust rather than when they are promoted heavily. It's very interesting. Sure. It's just kind of, and I feel like word of mouth is what's getting so much of this content, perhaps to get the kind of play on playback, on streaming devices, et cetera. Yvette Gerner, Director General of Radio Bremen, is asking, what are your plans to reach out to audiences with migrant backgrounds, rural areas as well? I mean, this speaks to your, and this is a concern you've expressed, that the BBC needs to be a public service for the whole of the UK, not totally. Just for cities and certain, demographics. What's your plan there to address those?
It's a hugely important issue. It's critical. As public service broadcasters, we are searching out kind of voices from across, the UK now, across the nations as well, the dynamics of Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. We have 39 local radio stations. I'm hugely keen to make sure all that regional and local expertise is the very heart of the BBC. I think there's a real danger for modern institutions if they feel too, linked to, in our case, London or a capital city, they feel too metropolitan. We've seen this in politics where an institution feels a bit more detached. And I think that what we need, what are the tactics to do that? The first is, we've already done some of this in the BBC, but pretty much half our staff work outside of London. You've got to make major moves to push beyond headquarters. And it's really interesting because COVID now has really challenged this idea of big headquarters. We've got to make sure that our reporting unearths different perspectives. I sometimes think that, impartiality is often, gets back to the top of this discussion, which is, we hear from someone on the left side of politics, on the right side of politics. Actually, there might be points of view that don't fit with that aren't actually represented by political parties, that feel more issue-led. We've got to make sure we have a wider diversity of voices. And we've got to understand that any kind of natural assumptions around how people are feeling, I think there needs to be a real humility around that. The BBC is good at it. I can beat us up, but we're pretty good at it. Whereas we're way ahead of anyone else in the UK in terms of trusted news source and a brand for me, as it were. But I think we need to do more, and we need to make sure that there's no BBC type or voice that means you don't feel your point of view is represented. It's hard work, by the way. You have to really work hard at it and not just get the same guests, the same people, the same discussion going. You have to challenge it and also accept views that you might not like yourself, which I think is part of the challenge around impartiality.
Right, and if you have a more diverse workforce, quite naturally, you'll reach more people.
Exactly.
You say the key is content. How has COVID affected the production schedule for some of the content you were hoping to release this year and next year? And will that be problematic?
Well, I'm sure everyone will have the similar experiences, because the truth is, it's pretty amazing the efforts that people are making to get news coverage, all the various genres that we're putting out. But there is a but, which is certainly and I know everyone's in different situations, so it's very difficult to generalize. But when we had the first lockdown in the UK, and production stopped of scripted productions. So largely, all our dramas, actually, I was running BBC Studios at the time. We had, well north of 100 productions running. And many of those, just frankly, you just delayed. And now we're in a position on scripted where in the UK, for what it's worth, we do have, through a whole load of interventions, there's been some helpful interventions from government. We've got insurance in place. We've got support for freelancers. It's not perfect, but we've got lots going on that's helped. We're now largely, and through what we're calling in England, because it's different situations in Scotland and Wales, but largely through the UK, we can actually produce drama. The issue is we're seeing significant delays to production because talent availability, everything stacks up. So look, it hasn't been easy. I would say efforts are heroic. The good news is, and let's see how we go. If we can walk through this next period without stopping scripted production, it's really been it's really a major relief to us. And of course, the other thing is, I think there's no doubt about it. It's like sports fixtures. I think everyone's done a just truly stupendous job of getting Premier League fixtures or entertainment shows up and running. But boy, would we like to see some audiences back. I think it'll be a while, but that's the next real big breakthrough for us, is when we can get studio audiences back.
Last question from Andreas from Austria, ORF Austria. Nearly all members from the EBU community saw record ratings during the Corona crisis. I mean, obviously people were stuck at home. They were watching a lot of television. CNN got record ratings for its coverage of the US election, unsurprisingly. How can we transfer the success, quote unquote, I mean, I guess the high ratings numbers, into normal post-COVID, post-US election times? How do you do that?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? And I think, it is, look, these are pretty dark times, but the one thing we as public service broadcasters should celebrate is our role as a trusted source is, been really quite wonderful during this period. I mean, the audiences we're seeing, by the way, for as per the question, is we've seen huge audiences into news, massive. I mean, over 90. I think 1 week we were at 94% reach of the population. We're seeing also the regional news and those and I'll come to answer the question in a second. The local services really stepping in as well. Look, I don't have a magic answer. It's an annoyingly good question. I think there's a few things, aren't there, which is, I would say this regional and local storytelling, this really being very close, has really been something that we've seen as really powerful. In the BBC, we've also seen the power of live again. So we've had a couple of live, charity appeal nights or things that we've been doing where I think that there's something rather special about live television. And certainly from a BBC One point of view, our main channel, the value of that can never be underestimated. I think there'll still be a need. This is a more polarized society. There's a lot of tough stuff we've been through. This idea of coming together as a community, bringing, I mean, it's kind of slightly cliched, but it's true. What brings us together? Where can you get forum where people are coming together to discuss things, to share things, communal experiences? That is where I think public service television can do things that no one else can, and radio, I should say, but it can do things that no one else can do. The other final thing is, I think there's something, and this is in our research, is there's something extremely powerful about habitual relationships. So every day I go to, like yourself, I go to a news anchor, I trust them. And I think we need to make sure that we'll do all we can with our radio hosts, with our anchors on television, that they're building strong relationships with the audience, and that repeated daily interaction with someone you trust is of incredible value. And by the way, it's what really underpins, right to the top of the conversation, audience value when it comes to public service broadcasters.
It is about trust, certainly, with the audience, with the viewers, and establishing a relationship. Thank you very much, Tim Davie. It was a pleasure chatting with you here within the News Xchange, virtual News Xchange gathering this year. Thanks very much. Again, I'm Hala Gorani. Thank you for all your questions. You'll be able to watch this again on the EBU page, hopefully as a replay as well on the Facebook page. Thank you to all, and I will see you next time. I think I'm going to hand it back to Liz Corbin.
Thank you very much, Hala Gorani. Thank you, everybody at CNN. And thank you, of course, to Tim Davie, the new Director General at the BBC. He said to us at the very beginning, he said he didn't take this job for a quiet life. And you've just had an hour of his time. So we're hugely grateful to that and to everybody in London for making that happen. We also, for EBU members, couldn't have had a better endorsement for the members of the EBU to hear from the BBC's Director General about the importance of solidarity, the importance of us working together in these challenging but exciting times. For EBU members, the News Assembly starts tomorrow. There's a fantastic agenda. Please make sure you've registered, make sure you have your Zoom links, and if you need any more information, please go to the EBU website to get the information there. And for members of the News Xchange community, we are hoping to do this again in the new year. So please look out for emails from us. For now, from all of us here in Geneva, thank you to the team here, to the teams in London, to Hala and to Tim. We will say bye-bye. Thank you.